we did stories about werewolves killing Nazis, aliens and Nazis, and there's a lot of different types of Nazis you can punch. But at some point, you just want to make regular comics, about hybrid rabbits wandering the wasteland. That's more fun. That's where I want to live.
But you
not being angry all the time.
J'arrive à hold my edge, live on high.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to OCAST, your island gateway to all things geek. I'm your host tonight, MacDonald, and I am flying solo tonight. And just to let you know, everyone, if you are watching, give us a like and a subscribe. Make sure you and leave a review as well to really help us out in the algorithms. Tonight, I've got a guest, and it's not often I get to use his books literally pull no punches. And well, what more can I say? Always punch Nazis is like probably what you're all here for. What more? Just a lovely, good family fun activity. It's good fun for all the family. But I will quickly introduce our guest, Ben Ferrari. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thanks so much, Cal. I'm excited to be here.
All right. Yeah.
It's been a while.
So I guess,
interviews.
Well, hopefully we can warm you up, like I say. So I suppose, like with all these things, the best place always to go back to the beginning. So have you always had the comics bug, and were you always aspiring to be a writer and an author?
Yeah. I'll be 50 years old soon. I started drawing comics when I was 10 years old. I was born in Southern California, and I was tracing comic books at 10 years old. And here we are 40 years later, and I've been a part of somewhere near 100 different books, whether I was publishing them myself or being parts of other people's projects. Yeah, it's been a long time. A lot of writing, but mostly art. I typically don't call myself a writer, even though I have written plenty. Typically it's pencils and inks on paper.
So how did you get started in the comic business? Like, because I know we've had some comic writers on and artists on here. So was it a difficult road to it, or did you find your feet quite quickly after leaving school?
Well, I don't do it full time. This is for fun.
Okay.
But after high school, I ended up, you must be familiar with Rob Liefeld.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We know him well.
Comics. Yeah. So I was a huge fan of his when I was about, 18, I guess, out of high school. He actually went to my church in high school. And so I knew him. And at one point I chased him down after church and I asked him for tour of his studio. This is post New Mutants, and maybe at the end of the New Mutants era, before X-Force is when I got to know him, before he started Image Comics. And at some point he asked if I wanted to work for him, and I said yeah. So I went to work for Image Comics when they first started. He put me, Extreme Studios was his studio, he put me next door at the Image Central office, where I answered mail and was basically a gopher, helping out around Image Comics. And I did that for a while. And one day, it was a San Diego Comic-Con that I was helping out at. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to bring you over to Extreme." And I said, "Oh, great." So I spent the best 2 years of my life as a long-time comic book fan, a huge Rob Liefeld fan at the time.
Okay.
Suddenly there I was working for him in the studio. He had a studio with all the writers and artists, inkers, pencilers, letterers, colorists, a whole color studio. And I got to spend a couple years making comic books, and I learned how to make comic books during my couple years there. We're talking 94 to 96. And I did a couple of San Diego comic conventions with him. I learned everything. I inked some backgrounds on pages. I had a few quick tutorials from him as far as my art goes, where I did learn some valuable, interesting things. And then, I had some early morning discussions when I'd get to work with him about what I wanted to do in comics, and I wanted to be an editor. I wanted to be a penciler, but I knew I wasn't anywhere near that. So I didn't try and BS my way through that. I said, I like editing. I like putting the books together. And he liked that. So I'd spend my evenings after FedEx, in that day, everything was FedEx. All the original artwork would be put in a box, and sent across the country or into Canada for all of its for the printing mostly. And so we would, there was a lot of uploading of files and everything, but a lot of FedEx as well. So after FedEx, I would end up in the studio where I became good friends with so many people, so many good people. Dan Frega, Danny Mickey, Eric Stevenson, who's now the publisher of Image Comics, Logan Lubera, I'm still friends with, Matt Hawkins. I worked closely with Matt as an assistant on the Maximum Press books. But I'd spend my evenings getting to know these guys. I wouldn't go home. I would stay there and just hang out. And it was wonderful.
Yeah. I just say that.
So
a very interesting time to be in the comics industry then, because that's just when Image got started. So did you feel that kind of, I don't know, that kind of a feeling of, I don't know, was there a feeling of rebelliousness and all that going through Image when they first got started? Because it did start as almost an act of rebellion, that, didn't it?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. They left cushy, well-paying jobs, selling millions of comics at Marvel Comics. I think all of them were at Marvel at the time. Eric Larson, certainly, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, of course. Did it feel to me, an 18, 19-year-old, like rebellion? No, it was it was fun.
Yeah.
It was just a blast. I don't think I knew that I had something special. Books would go out the door and I'd see them on the stands that week. I would give tours around the studio. Retailers and fans would make an appointment, sometimes just walk in the door. And if it worked out, I was able to show them around. I felt like it was something special. Rebellious, no, it was special. It was fun. Again, it was the best time of my life. And it wasn't perfect, there's a lot of stories about Liefeld, and a lot of them are true, unfortunately.
Okay.
He's not a perfect person. I admire what he's done, but personality-wise, he can be extremely difficult. There's very few people who've worked closely with him. I shouldn't say that. I should say there's a lot of people who have negative opinions of him.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, I believe, is deserved from having worked closely with him.
But at the same time, you're quite thankful to him because he did give you like an entrance into this wonderful world, kind of.
Absolutely. I ended up taking what I learned there, and starting in probably 2000, I moved to San Francisco from Orange County, Southern California, and I started drawing a story. It took a couple of years, but eventually 2008 or so, I finished 4 issues of a book called The Long Hunters. And it hadn't occurred to me before then to do more and do all kinds of different things and start my own publishing. But eventually I did. In 2008, 2010, I started working with a lot of people. That's kind of when the internet became big for me, meeting people online, like-minded people. And so we collaborated on a lot of things. And I used skills that I had from my time at Extreme Studios to make the books, all the different stages, who needs to do what size things need to be at, the printing, the coloring. Not that I'm a pro at all of those different things, but you get a certain confidence working in a studio, and then you work with people who everybody does a different part. And next thing you know, you've got dozens of books that you have behind you, So I've been doing local conventions since then, 2008 to now, selling comic books that I've made, and I've made a lot of different books, a lot of different properties. I ended up getting 2 series published through a company called Red 5 Comics, kind of a medium-sized publisher here. And I've done a couple of, I'm still involved with them, and it's great. I have a series called The Carriers, Weaponized Carrier Pigeons, and their New York Adventures. We've done 2 volumes. Yeah. In fact, there's a company that picked us up, and it's trying to make a cartoon out of it right now. So as of right now, the last couple of weeks, they've been pitching to networks, trying to get the Carriers as an animated show. That's the biggest thing happening right now. I have another book called The Sun Chasers. It's about the son of Hitler, out to redeem the Hitler name. He's a good person taking out people like his father, sort of like the Punisher, with a much better backstory. That was another Red 5 comic. So, all that experience with Extreme led to opportunities, just making the books. Obviously, you're not going to get opportunities without doing the hard work. But, I have series now with Red 5. I have another one that I'm shopping around. I'm 5 issues into it, called Kanan the Marauder. It's kind of a Conan style rabbit, humanoid rabbit far in the future. Kanan is Conan, right? I kind of cut out all the magic. I'm not really into the magic part of it, but it's an action adventure rabbit Conan story. So I'm looking for a publisher right now for that. Possibly Red 5. We'll see.
So I'm guessing, I'm guessing you're kind of quite thankful it was Image that you went to rather than one of the big houses, because it seems you've kind of got that independent spirit and also that want to control your own work. I mean, I suppose you're quite grateful it was Image you got your start at.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think a lot about what I don't do, and I don't draw Batman, I don't draw Superman or the X-Men. I draw my own stuff, and I want to control my own thing. Did that come from Image Comics? Yeah, that's certainly a good idea, possibly. Yeah, of course. Image Comics, you see those guys create their own thing from nothing, and it becomes this huge thing, and they have fans all over the world. They control their own destiny. They control everything about it, whether it becomes a show. Sometimes those shows don't do well, but they were able to take them there, and give them that possibility of a movie or animated series or whatever. So based on my association with Red 5 Comics, I've been able to do that over the last 2 years, pitch to a lot of different studios, producers, I should say, the different comics I've made. And in the same vein as Image Comics, I'm able to do that with my things.
Yeah, because it's almost like a little bit of a life lesson, like, with Marvel and DC, you're very comfortable, but you're never really pushed, or you never take those risks. And that's like what you said about Image. Sometimes they work, a lot of times they don't, but at least they try, and they try to do something fresh and new all the time. And like yourself, that's what you're doing as well, kind of.
Yeah, I don't read any Marvel comics anymore. I grew up on the superhero stuff, but I can't read another superhero story with, 10 superheroes on doing a big punching battle on some planet, or it's just so boring to me now, even though that's what I grew up on reading. So I make all kinds, and that's what I like about Image Comics. There's a little bit of superhero, sure. Invincible, I read for years from Kirkman, but it was different. It wasn't just your straight superhero. There was death and there was violence and all kinds of inappropriate stuff. But now I'll do this is, Brubaker and Sean Phillips, all their collaborations. I love the crime books. Conan, I read old Conan and new Conan. Very little superhero anymore.
Yeah, it's the same over here in Britain. You probably know about 2000 AD and how that springboarded so many of our artists. And it was that you read some of the stories in there's a lot that's not worked for 2000 AD, but there's a lot that has and stuck around. And, even the ones that failed, they've learned from it and went on to bigger things. So, yeah, it's important to have that kind of risk-taking, which is, I think, just in general in the creative arts right now, everything seems so risk-averse, doesn't it?
Risk-averse in the creative arts? I was going to say the opposite. It feels like it feels to me, maybe not on television and the movies, right? Yeah. Because they have a whole skewed reality because of the pandemic and everybody doing streaming and not going to theaters. But comics, I feel like it's a golden age right now.
All right. Okay.
I feel like there's every genre out there. You also get the old classics like G.I. Joe and Transformers. They are the best they've ever been. But then you get the crime stuff. You get, something called the Skin Breaker, which sort of an Avatar-ish feel. This is new. This is different. It's gorgeous. So, yeah, I'd say that as far as comics, it's a good time. There's a little of everything available, and I feel like sales are up too, is what I hear once in a while.
Okay.
And I feel like that's probably because more is available. Not everybody's going to want to read superheroes,
Yeah. Well, I do, I'm just sitting, what am I saying? But in terms of TVs and movies, the one and I keep bringing it is Netflix. I will praise them for what they're doing for international markets now.
Okay.
I've been exposed to so many foreign shows, and I've actually gone into foreign comics now. If you're aware of, there's a show on Netflix called The Eternaut.
Argentine.
Yes.
Argentina, I believe,
Yeah, and it's I found out about that show, and it's actually one of the organizers of our Comic-Con is from Argentina. And I spoke to him afterwards. I just saw this show on Netflix, really good. And it's I said, is that Eternaut? I said, that's one of our most celebrated works in art. And it's opened me up now to South American comics, a world I didn't know existed. So, I think Netflix deserves a lot for what they're doing at the moment.
I agree. Yeah, there's tons of different things on Netflix that how would I have been exposed to otherwise? Absolutely right. Yeah, Netflix, well, yes, no, you're absolutely right. They're putting a lot of shows from different cultures all over the world, and that's excellent. I think there's everybody's looking for grounded things. So I don't think you're going to see as many big sci-fi expensive things like we'd like to see, like we're used to seeing. And, because they have to pay the bills, of course, and there's no DVD sales anymore, Blu-ray sales. So, there's a quality deficiency sometimes on some of the streaming shows, but there's lots of genres, like we're saying, there's lots of advantages to what Netflix is doing.
Yeah, it's like kind of strange. Like my favorite show of the past year, I'm a sci-fi guy, but it's been a medieval comedy set in medieval Poland, of all things. It's like the Office set in medieval Poland, and it's one of the funniest and freshest things I've seen in such a long time. It's called 1670. Look it up, and you will laugh.
Okay.
Again, it's and my Polish girlfriend's had an influence in this, but she's watched it with me and said the English dub is quite accurate, so you don't need to worry about you're getting a poor quality dub. But with that, I will move on to the main topic, which is Always Punch Nazi. So how did this idea come about?
Well, it came about because of what we call Charlottesville, 2016 in the U.S. East Coast. Charlottesville, big. It was the first, I'd say, onset of Nazis being back in the United States. Marching with their tiki torches, saying, you Jews shall not replace us, and all this garbage. A coworker ended up at Charlottesville speaking and, doing an opening bit for David Duke. David Duke is, Ku Klux Klan, white supremacist, been around in the U.S. for a long time. And then, of course, this girl named Heather Heyer, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing her last name, Heather Heyer, she got killed by one of them driving a car into the crowds. So a friend of mine named Silas Dixon contacted me. We'd been making comics together for a long time. And he said, hey, what do you think about making an anti-racism anthology, in response to what's happening right now? I said, yeah, that's a great idea. My only stipulation was that we called it Always Punch Nazis. And he said, sure, whatever. And here we are, so that was 2016. We did a volume. So over the next 4 years, over a 4-year period, we did 3 volumes of Always Punch Nazis. I didn't grab them. I can jump over there and grab them real fast. That was 2020, and I was exhausted. And it took me 4 years to get my act together. I can go into why it was exhausting, but so basically in the last about a year ago, I guess 2024, I finally put the 3 volumes together into a hardcover, which I do have sitting here.
Ooh, nice.
Always Punch Nazis hardcover collection, featuring the 3 volumes. My company's called Pilot Studios, so I self-published it. Yeah, that's how it came about.
And of course, with this, you started it on Kickstarter as well.
Correct.
And it got a little bit of a reaction on Kickstarter. Now, did this surprise you, the reaction it got, or were you anticipating it? Or did you think, well, something's going to be said, but you didn't expect such a severe reaction, kind of?
Yeah, there was no preparing for what happened. And I haven't thought about this in a while, so forgive me if I'm stumbling on the details. What happened was Kickstarter. Well, there's an article that came out on Breitbart News, a right-wing media website, and they did a big article on Always Punch Nazis and Kickstarter specifically. And their point of the article was that Kickstarter was breaking its own terms of service. Is that the term? Advocating, there's no advocating violence against others. But their Breitbart News was telling everybody that Kickstarter shouldn't be publishing a book called Always Punch Nazis because it was advocating violence against Nazis. I think that tells you a lot about where they're coming from, right? And it certainly didn't stop us. Okay, well, it's all coming back to me now. So Kickstarter almost kicked us off the platform based on that pressure. And the rank and file of Kickstarter fought back. And there was a 2-year battle between the rank and file of Kickstarter and Kickstarter management. My book stayed on the platform. It didn't take 2 years to determine that. It stayed on the platform. I found out all of this later, that there was this huge battle. And the battle was Kickstarter wanted to kick it off. The rank and file said no. And it led to the unionization of the Kickstarter rank and file into what's called Kickstarter United. So that, of all the things I've done, that's one of the biggest that I'm most proud of. I didn't do it myself, but it was our book that led to one of the bigger tech companies in Kickstarter, which is very respected, to go union, and it got those people a contract, and they had a say over what was on the platform, clearly based on our book. So, that was a huge, huge time. I met with a couple of people who were fired because of my book. I say my book, but it's lots of people's book. This is it's a anthology. So there are lots of writers, lots of artists. I didn't do it all. I was the editor and, sort of led the way. But, people were fired because of this. People were fired because of the unionization push based on this comic book. And that's huge. People's careers ended over this. So first one went, did its thing. The second one built the audience. The third one was bigger than that. And then the trade paperback, the hardcover was our biggest one yet. We're not talking about $100,000 or $1 million. Very small compared to lots of other things. But, it's my greatest achievement for sure. The book itself. And then somebody's asking, are you planning to tackle some other political topics again? Or are you taking a breather from that kind of theme for a while? Great question. It took me 4 years to collect the books, because the stress level of being attacked and calling people Nazis is you can't take that lightly. That's not a fun thing. I love politics. I've been involved in politics most of my life, but this is a whole nother level. And I don't, I can fight. I fight, but I don't enjoy it. I'd rather just make regular comic books and go to work and hang out with my family. So I don't look for it. We felt like we had to do it, and we eventually did the collection. There's been certainly discussions about doing a fourth individual volume. And there was, for a time, we were going to do specific topics. This originally was an anti-racist anthology, and that's really the best way to describe it. But it also became a lot more, became a lot bigger, lots of different sort of progressive liberal politics we put in there, not just racism. So I think the answer to your question is definitely taking a breather. I prefer never to do it again, honestly. I have fun making adventure stories. This takes a lot out of you. Yeah. And I'm kind of over it.
I suppose, what do you say I'll just build on that, to the people, you probably gotten this comment often, keep politics out of comics, keep politics out of art. I mean, I know what my response is, but what's your own personal response to that?
I'm going to say what I want when I want to say it. Yeah. And I want to make political comics. That's what I'm going to do. You don't have to read it, Stay away. Yeah. If you have a problem with me making anti-Nazi comic books, I don't want anything to do with you anyway. Yeah. So that works out, I think, for everybody.
Because, the route I take is basically any art to me is just always inherently political on some level. Because there's something of the person going into it, and how can you not be expressing your views through your art? I don't know if there's any political art out there. Someone please find it for me, because I've yet to find any.
Yeah, I mean, look at the background on this show you're doing. Yeah. You got Captain America punching out Nazis. I mean, they're the original bad guys. In American mindset anyway. So.
Yeah, and Captain America, that's why he exists. He was offered to take a drug to make him better at punching Nazis. So, right. I mean, it's like when people refer to Marvel as not being political, it's all politics, at the end of the day.
I would certainly agree. There's a lot of political stories, and then I would also say that there's a lot of stories that are not political. You can look at the basics of the X-Men. You can find some politics in there. You can find stories about people being marginalized, and different, not accepted, and rounded up. That's what the X-Men is. So, again, I don't want to make a lot of these because it kills you. Being angry all the time. I spent a lot of time being angry and making these comics. And fighting people about it, and losing a lot of friends. A lot of friends don't want to be a part of this because they are not Nazis, but, you know, a lot of Republican policies, you know, you can say that they're racist, right? And so a Republican friend of mine who doesn't want to be considered a Nazi is not going to appreciate being called a Nazi or being, you know, lumped in with them even. You know, but that's the reality. That's what we're dealing with. We're making these books, and it's highly politically charged.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, is that the main difference between writing a more politically charged comic? It's just more anger goes into it.
Yeah.
That's basically the main ingredient.
Yeah, you're finding things that you find wrong with your society, and you're writing stories about it. You know, that's not where you want to live all the time. It has to be done if you want to make change, you know, but, you know, we did stories about werewolf Nazis. I'm sorry, werewolves killing Nazis.
All right.
Aliens and Nazis, and, you know, there's a lot of different types of Nazis you can punch, and we did it all. We did different genres, you know, we did every different kind of genre. But at some point, you know, you just want to make regular comics, you know, about hybrid rabbits, you know, wandering the wasteland. You know, that's more fun. That's where I want to live.
You
not being in real time.
You triggered a thought in my head, something I recommend you. There's 2 Norwegian films. They're 2 in the same, called Dead Snow, and that's about zombie Nazis attacking these campers up in the hills of Norway.
That sounds vaguely familiar. Is that a few years old? I don't think I saw it, but
early 2000s. The first one, it's just these campers, but in the second one, how does it happen? The guy loses his arm, but he's grafted on a zombie arm, so he gets zombie powers. And so to fight the zombie Nazis, he goes up into the hills of Norway, and he blasts the ground and resurrects the Red Army, zombie style, to fight them. So it's a big zombie Nazis versus zombie communists in this big massive battle. It is fantastic. Dead Snow. I so recommend it.
And two of them, huh? 2 zombie Nazi movies.
And you might, I think you'd enjoy the second one because they employ the help of these kind of Americans called the zombie squads that come over. And it's a lot of their observations of European culture. And like, it's a lot of them going, oh, this would be so much easier if you could buy guns in this country.
I'm sold.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
So look it up to Dead Snow. I so recommend it. So going back to the comic itself, so the collaboration, was it easy to find like a good load of comic writers who wanted to write? There
was lots of people who wanted to be a part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
And that grew as we went. You know, I'd have...
So the overall political leaning you feel of the comics, is it mixed or is it more progressive, would you say?
It's for sure. It's for sure mixed. As it turns out, a lot of my old friends from my time at Extreme Studios are right wing, you know. Sometimes they won't admit to be Trumpers, and they're always sort of, you know, like we've discussed earlier, I think before we started the show, you know, a lot of middle ground people, you know, who refuse to take a side. I consider that right wing. You know, typically the libertarians will in the end vote for the Republican. Most libertarians in the end used to be Republicans or vote for the Republican candidate, in my opinion. And so, I'd say a lot of industry professionals, certainly not all, but a lot, are conservative and don't find this funny or interesting, or they don't support it at all. You know, I was lucky to I did some reviews on the back. Mark Wade had nice things to say. Justin Jordan, Dan Panosian, Jamal Eigel, Howard Chaykin, they all gave me a little something here. And you know, not that they did interiors, I'm not saying that, but they had nice things to say, and so I included it on here. But then you got a guy named Chuck Dixon. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's been around for a long time. Did I send him the entire PDF to peruse? I definitely asked him his opinion of the book. I forget in what volume, but I asked him, and he said it's like superheroes. It's childish wish fantasy, wish fulfillment in that realm. Totally insulting it. You know, this is over Messenger. And I said, hey, can I use that as a review? He said, sure. So sometimes I'll do an ad with Chuck Dixon's negative review on Always Punch Nazis, you know, which is fun.
And the other way was, there's some who really surprised you that they just thought this is completely wrong. You don't have to name names here if you'd rather not.
I wouldn't say that. Most people keep quiet if they
Yeah.
have something against it. Believe it or not, right? There's so much fighting online
Mm-hmm.
politically, but I don't think I got any pushback per se. If anything, it was just sort of ignoring the whole topic.
Yeah.
I've put out 4 projects based on Always Punch Nazis, and there are people who've never piped up in support or against it at all. And that's surprising. I suppose you could say that does surprise me, But then I got a guy named Richard Pace, absolute consummate professional, did a story, very personal story called The Only Good Nazi.
Yeah.
Very personal story about his family and propaganda and Fox News. It's absolutely gorgeous. He did all the art and colors, a nice 3-pager, and then lots of professionals, colorists contributed as well.
But like, was there any names that really surprised you when they came forward to support you? Like, or you just grateful for all their help?
Well, besides those people giving me, I wouldn't say any superstars jumped in. It was mostly, as far as reviews and quotes and things like that. Hillary Barta. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
Right here.
Yeah.
He did a lot. He's been around the industry for a long time. So there was some, wow, I'm proud of this moments, but no superstars. I'm not going to say that Jim Lee jumped on board to provide a cover or nothing, And then most people who were against it just kept their mouth shut. I think it's fair to say.
But overall, I'm taking you were very happy with the amount of people who did want to contribute. Was it more than what you expected?
Yeah, and every volume, the people wanted to do another story or a second part of their first story, or people checking in to see if I needed art or letters or whatever they could offer. So there was a lot of that, and I would say that I have some lifelong friends because of that book.
It's Nazi punching brings people together as well.
Yeah, and that was 9 years ago we started it, and you would think we'd be past it.
Yeah, you think, but it's sadly maybe still all too relevant to subject given current state of affairs, isn't it?
Yeah, it's frightening actually. I don't. Your listener, your watcher asked if I was going to do more, and like I said, it's just I should be doing more, right? If I wanted to sell a lot of comics, but for mental health, I just I can't do it.
Is it just the trolling and all that you got? Did you get quite a bit of trolling about it, or just was there quite a bit of abuse aimed at you?
Yeah, you have random people in chat rooms, talking about what if they punch back, like that sort of thing, as if it's bad to punch Nazis. A lot of people think it is. You shouldn't. You shouldn't be violent. You should, like you said, you should be able to talk to your political enemies and things like that. And advocating violence against them is negative and all this crap. And that was a big part of the Kickstarter kerfluffle battle, is that we were supposedly advocating violence against others. And we're very clear in the indicia, that this is not physically suggesting you go out and punch somebody. We're not suggesting that. This is a battle of the mind and what's right and wrong. But of course, if you have a Nazi is doing Nazi things, sometimes you have to do it.
Yeah, because that was probably the whole Nazi punching, just the idea in the public culture. That was from the Richard Spencer incident, wasn't it? That's when it all came.
Getting punched? Yeah, Richard Spencer got punched pretty well.
Which is a wonderful moment, which on my Twitch streams, that's one of the alerts that comes up, is just him repeatedly getting hit to the sound of the
I love that.
20 overture, I think I've got it redubbed to.
Oh, yeah. You wouldn't think it's as controversial, but there was a lot of controversy, a lot of people pushing back. Feel free to your watchers to go onto Breitbart News and do a search for Always Punch Nazis Kickstarter. Ben Ferrari, I think I'm one of the only names that were named on it, which was a scary moment too.
Yeah. So this might get a bit personal, but when all that started, where did you ever think about, no, I can't carry on with this, this is too much? Or did it just embolden you a bit more, maybe?
Oh, no. It never made me want to stop.
Yeah.
After the first 3, I thought I was done, certainly. But that's just from exhaustion. But, nobody ever threatened violence. I was not afraid. Although, actually, I should take that back. The Breitbart News article was pretty terrifying. And it wasn't just me. A lot of my friends and collaborators had people pushing back a lot. I'll bet you there's a lot of stories that I'm forgetting from my friends or that they would be happy to share about their time, you know. But no, I'm just exhausted of making these controversial books. And that's the only reason I'm not making them regularly.
Yeah.
You know. Maybe I'll license it out and let somebody else do it.
So, and with this, we've talked about the making of it. So, can you talk? It's one we've always asked our comic people that we've had on, what your creative process was, like, especially with an anthology as well.
Yeah.
Like, what was the exact process you went through, like from idea all the way to ink on the page?
Most of these stories are 100% other people. There was I suppose I was editing for content, saying, no, thanks. I don't want anything with that in it. But otherwise, if people had a story idea or if they had something finished already, I was very open to it, as long as it's a certain quality. This book looks good because we curated, we didn't, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to let a beginner penciler do a story in this book of mine. It's not going to happen, so we have good artists, we have good writers, the coloring is excellent, and then the letters are all professionals. So a lot of times it was just people saying, I have a story, are you interested in drawing it? I did a couple stories. One was just somebody saying, I have a story, would you be interested in reading it? And I said, sure. And then a few months later we have a 6-page story done. And then I have so many contacts and friends in the industry that I would say, hey, for some letters on this story, sure. And then colors, etc. And sometimes it was, hey, let's do a story. I have a couple of friends, good friends, one named Jay Hewer, one named Kurt Belcher. There's sort of my brain trust with Pilot Studios. Everything I do, I run by them for their opinions. And they wrote a lot of these stories. And I think a lot of them were collaborative type stories where we would both come up with, all three of us or two of us come up with an idea and they would sit and write it out. And then together we'd find an artist and carry on, these stories come from all kinds of different directions. Sometimes I said people just show up with something. Sometimes we develop it and find the right artist. Sometimes somebody random shows up with something finished. It's everything. In this volume, the hardcover, we actually put a couple of news stories in the back. There was people that were like, hey, if you ever do something again, let me know. I'd like to do something. And so, well, we're doing this hardcover. Let's put in some new content, and so I have a couple of news stories in here, some of which were new people, new collaborators. Some were people that had worked with us before.
Yeah. Because that's what's got me. Like, I've been scanning the book since we organized this thing. You sent me the digital copy, and it comes across how personal some of the stories are. There's a lot of personal experience being relayed. It's not just all angry person kind of shouting with this megaphone. There seems to be a lot of genuine kind of, reflections on their own experience.
Yeah. There's a story about, a trans character, and I think that was personal to the artist. There's a lot of personal stuff going on in here. There's a lot of, the battles between, online battles, I should say, between conservative people in the industry. I'm blanking on the name of the conservative sort of contingent in the industry, but, there's all these battles. So we have some stories based on that, between those online battles between the right and the left. We got some superhero stuff. We got some sci-fi stuff. Yeah. We have a story about Jack Kirby, actually, so it's sort of ripped from the headlines where, some people came into the studio. It's based on a true story. And, he went after them. Jack Kirby went after these guys, he says, I hate Nazis. And, he chases these guys out of the building, out of the studio. So that's one of my favorites, actually. That's Jack Kirby right there. There's some gay rights stories. There's lots of racism based stories, clearly that was where it all came from. So, there's a lot of personal ideas in here to people, whether that's personal to them, or they know people. That's what people are writing about, stories to uplift the marginalized, and often that's racist towards Black people, especially in the United States, and so that's where a lot of stories came from in the beginning. But then, like I said, it became much bigger than just the anti-racism, but still had a big part of it.
Yeah, because I think that's also a reflection of where comics are now, and I think there has been a more move away from superheroes because people are realizing there's all these other stories being told. Comics is a medium, and it's not necessarily just a style of story unto itself.
Yeah. I mean, superheroes can be boring, even though, there's a decent chunk of this book that is based on superheroes, but we got some horror in there, and it's just so much more interesting to do different kinds of stories. All the things I'm developing these days are survival stories and adventure stories, and some slice of life, things like that, some crime. Yeah, it's just it's a big world out there. You don't have to just do superheroes.
Yeah, like one of the most recent ones I've read was have you heard of the one Palestine? Have you read that?
That's an older book, right? Yes.
Yeah, I've only just read that, but it's just like blows you away what comics are capable of. Like, that's investigative journalism done through the medium of comics, which sounds so bizarre, but it just works, kind of.
Absolutely. People like stories, people like some historical fiction, and then obviously real life history and things that are happening right now. So the Palestine book was huge, as I recall.
Yeah. I only just got around to reading that, just with obvious events, and I heard about this, and it's like I'm obviously trying to get some Palestinian voices on this show for our own petty reasons. I might explain that. Well, basically, we found out our podcast charted in Israel, and straight away, all my co-hosts were saying, right, now it's time to get some Palestinian creatives on here immediately.
That's a terrific idea. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so taking that forward, I'm just having a look. And so would you say this is the biggest risk you've ever taken on, was doing this? Or did you rethink of it as a risk at the time?
At the time, I don't think I thought it was a risk. It was just what had to be done. Yeah. And, I was up for the fight, and that fight came, and we ended up doing 4 volumes. And so I feel like not a risk. No. Was it risky as far as personality, as far as relationships with others? Yeah, that didn't turn out so good. But, no, it's like anything else you believe in, you just have to do. I wouldn't say I considered it a risk.
Yeah.
What did it cost? It didn't cost me anything. I suppose some friends, but I also made a lot of friends.
Yeah.
A lot of collaborators, a lot of people, contributed their hard work and their stories and their perspectives. And, we created something pretty special.
Yeah. So, and also you kind of alluded to, but see you in the process, did you have to pull any stories were the ones you think that maybe went too far or maybe didn't go far enough? Was there just, you don't have to name specifics, but was there any that just...
No, I didn't, probably during the creation of it, I would say I said, no, thanks. I don't want to touch on that. I can't give you an example of that, but we didn't take everything. I'm going to tell you the truth. There's there's a story by, somebody who I would have at one point considered a friend. And I hate to use the word canceled, but he got canceled. He did some stupid stuff. He did some embarrassing things that he was very embarrassed about. Not rape or anything to that level, but just embarrassing behavior online. And I don't see him around anymore, And I considered taking his story out, but I didn't. It's still in there, and it's a good story. And, I think that's the big question, right? You have people who do things out in the world that you respect and you love what they're making and they're doing, and then they turn out to be a disappointment, I guess is a nice way to say that. And how do you still listen to Michael Jackson songs? That's up for you to decide, right? So I decided, in the terms of the Michael Jackson example, I'm going to still listen to the Michael Jackson song, even though he's an awful person. I know what he did. And so I kept the guy's story in there, even though some of my collaborators were not happy about that. I can acknowledge his mistakes and not apologize for it. I'm sorry, I can agree that what he did was wrong, but we still have this amazing work from him, and I am going to keep it in there. You know, some people won't like that perspective, and I certainly would never throw him under the bus and say his name. He was embarrassed about it
Yeah.
at the time, and you know, he quit the comics industry, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Yeah, because, well, on a smaller scale, we're kind of dealing with a little bit of that dilemma just doing this podcast, because we're doing retrospectives on existing properties, and we've currently started Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and there's obviously a very big elephant in that room, and we keep saying we're going to have to address that at some point, because I think that's like, because I'm more like, there's always a bit of the artist in the art, and so if you do it, you have to address the problematic person behind it.
It's extremely tough
Yeah.
situation that you get into trying to decide what to do. You know, I guess I don't want to cancel everybody for making mistakes. You know, I just don't. We're talking people's livelihoods, their families, the embarrassment that goes along with it. And I think I can say that I don't pile on when people, you know, there's so many people go through this over the last, well, I mean, since the internet, I think, really, right? More so than ever before.
Oh, yeah.
And I refuse to pile on, you know, while I can acknowledge somebody's terrible behavior. You know, it doesn't help for me to pile on, and I don't see it helping anybody. A woman stole my car years ago, and I decided, you know, they found the car at a local gas station, and they called me, and there she was, you know, this old lady with drugs in the trunk and stolen mail, and I just thought, I'm not gonna file a police report. I'm not gonna file charges, I should say. I'm not gonna file charges against this person who has so many problems. Doesn't help me. I get my car back. So I guess I kind of look at it like that, you know, as far as bad behavior from people that I've worked with. It doesn't happen often, that's for sure. I can only think of one example.
Yeah. I think maybe, I'm talking from my point of view, maybe the dividing line for us is like, has this person actively sought out to cause harm to people? And that's, whereas
absolutely,
if it's someone who's just by, you know, just ignorance or just like without thinking done things, there's like, where there's malice involved. Like, I'm talking of obvious example, like a J.K. Rowling. She is causing actual harm to people, and I think things should happen to her. Like, she should be held accountable.
Agreed. Absolutely right. And I'm happy to say that I haven't had to deal with that.
Yeah.
As far as making books, you know, we're talking about some bad behavior, being a little too, you know, handsy with women, I think is the best way to put it. Not even handsy, but just, you know, being too, in this particular case, just being too forward and a little bit inappropriate.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It's like something they could have learned from. They could have maybe had the chance to learn, maybe, rather than.
Yeah. You know, yes, exactly. I was hoping he would be forgiven overall from the industry, but people didn't want to, and oh well.
Yeah. So I think just to take it to a closer, we've talked about the indie and mainstream. So if you were able to go, like, say, into Marvel and tell them, this is the one thing indie does that you guys really should be taking on yourselves. Like, or you could go into DC right now and tell them, this is the lesson you should take from us indie guys. And if you applied this, it'd be so much better. What's the one thing you would tell them?
Absolutely. Great question. I think the thing I would tell them is, and it seems obvious, but make new characters and give them a finite story, do 4 issues, and then, you know, not an ongoing forever thing. You know, people are bored. I am bored of seeing the same X-Men stories. Not same X-Men. They've tried new things, but I want to see new things, new ideas, new genres. I will collect different genres from you, Marvel Comics, but I'm not collecting your superhero stuff, you know, and I want to see something 4 or 5 issues long that has an ending and consequences, and, you know, where I know that not everybody is going to survive, right? At the end of these Marvel stories, everybody's the same, and that gets old. So let's do something, you know, create new things, please, and give it to us with an ending so we can say, I enjoyed that story, what happened to those characters, and then that's it, you know, and they're in the past.
Yeah, because it's like with Marvel, you've obviously they'll have these long sagas, and then there's just a big reset at the end because they've now got a multiverse and they can just reset and everything just starts off again for a new storyteller. But he's obviously been so tightly controlled. The Marvel say you've got to
Yeah.
tell.
You're right. And
Yeah.
these big events, so that's a whole other thing I would tell them is stop with the big events,
Yeah.
because, they have a big event
Yeah.
where nothing consequential happens typically, and then they restart the numbering. It's like, if you're going to do ongoing superhero comics, people I like to collect number 800, let's get a milestone, 1,000.
Yeah.
And issue 1,000, but they just restart the numbering.
Yeah.
Right. If you're going to do ongoing, now that you've done 15 volumes of Captain America, what's the people can't keep track of what came when and before what, and it's just too confusing. I would say continue the numbering. Don't do events all the time because you're forcing people to buy 30 different comic books for the story that isn't going to mean anything in the end. You're just going to restart it, like you said. So all kinds of reasons I think they're not doing so well.
So thinking like the last Marvel thing that really engaged me was Garth Ennis when he did Punisher, but it wasn't the mainline pun when he did Punisher Max. And
oh my gosh.
You remember that? The Max line?
Yeah. Well, the Max line, he's done a couple of minis.
Yeah. And it was he was like stories that he went to Northern Ireland for a book. And then he was dealing with, sex traffickers. And it was just great little stories like that. Didn't have to be a big just grounded everyday stuff. And I engaged with that more than any Punisher meets Spider-Man and Wolverine kind of stuff ever.
Absolutely. There's a Garland Parlov, I want to say, as an artist.
That rings a bell, yeah.
Parlov, yeah. I think they did a bunch of minis, the two of them, Garth Ennis. And those were some of the best things ever, grounded action stories. Right, where he wasn't, the Punisher shouldn't be part of a big galactic story anyway. Neither should Daredevil. He should just be a, New York crime detective sort of thing,
Plus, it also worked better that the Punisher he was in his 50s and he was seen as a broken man at that point. Like all this has taken an effect on him. That's what it doesn't fit in with this bright, cheerful Marvel world, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
But anyway, we're just coming up on time there. So this is what I do to a lot of my guests. I spring this on them. I don't know if you listen to any of our shows.
I have not. You contacted me out of the blue?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we always finish off with a nice quickfire round of kind of sort of kind of fun questions just to wrap it up. So are you ready for some quickfire questions?
Yes, if I can plug my book.
Go ahead. Of course.
Always Punch Nazis I have on my Etsy page.
Yeah.
If you go on Etsy and you search Pilot Studios, Always Punch Nazis, you'll find the individual volumes and the hardcover. I have hundreds of copies left over and I'd like to get rid of them. Okay.
Okay, so number one.
Go ahead.
Some people say comics should stay apolitical. You say?
I say people can do whatever they want, whether it's straight up political comic books like Always Punch Nazis or superhero or whatever they want.
Yeah.
Don't tell somebody else what to make.
Punchy Nazis, is it still edgy or is it just common sense?
These days it's edgy because there's so many people who don't think that you should just punch a Nazi, right? You should have a discussion with them, a debate.
So some critics call this woke propaganda. You call them? Or
I call this common sense kindness to people. My politics is about being kind to people. Woke propaganda, okay, it's propaganda telling people not to be Nazi racist. Can't believe it's controversial.
If Always Punch Nazis was a wrestling promo, who's the heel and who's the babyface?
That's a tough one. I'm not into wrestling.
Yeah. Or you could pick some celebrities if it was going to be a wrestling promo. Maybe some current day people. I think there's some obvious. I think there's some.
Are we talking about real life or are we talking about my stories in here?
You can choose real life. We'll go right there with it.
Are we talking about good and bad? Is that the question?
So like the heel is the bad guy, the baby face is the good guy. So who would your choice for heel be?
Okay. The good guy these days is an AOC, a Bernie Sanders, a Gavin Newsom. He was always considered a moderate, but he's the good guy in my mind right now,
Right.
and I'm left of him.
Yeah.
And then the bad guy clearly is a Stephen Miller type, Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, who's telling us that Trump's going to have a third term, even though it's constitutionally illegal.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, are you punching fascism or punching complacency?
Can I do both?
Yeah, I can accept that. You've got two arms. You can boom, boom, double it. You can double tap.
I like to give people a hard time for sitting at home and not taking part in protests when their government is being taken over by an authoritarian.
All right. Well, the next question, kind of, what's more dangerous, fascism or silence?
Oh, geez, it's got to be silence, right?
Yeah.
If you don't say anything, then they're going to take over. If you don't fight, they win instantly.
And the last one is, so you've got to pitch this book to a room full of conservative comic fans. What's going to be your mic drop line?
My mic drop line?
Yeah. If you had to pitch this to a room full of conservatives, how would you walk away?
This book is about, actually I pitch it to them by telling them the truth. If you're a Donald Trump fan, you're not going to like this book, because this is anti-fascist, this is anti-racist, anti-authoritarian, pro-civil rights. I guess I'm not telling it to them.
Yeah.
I'm telling them why it's not for them.
Okay. With that, well, I was going to ask this, but if people want to look you up, find you, and if you've got anything to promote, you can. It's another chance to promote your stuff here.
Gotcha. I jumped in too early on my earlier. So, Etsy is only Always Punch Nazis these days. Generally, I'm on Facebook most of the time. I have a Pilot Studios Facebook page. I'm pretty good about posting things to that. But otherwise, anybody can friend me on Facebook. And I've taken a break from the politics on Facebook because mentally it's not good. When you're not sleeping, it's not good. But I'm regular with my comic book readings and art that I'm making for comic books and comic books that I'm reading. So I'm happy to talk to people about anything, anytime. If you want to friend me or follow me or whatever on Facebook, that's fine. That'd be great. I'm on Instagram, but I don't pay much attention to it, even though I probably should. So I guess that's about it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. It's been very, very interesting. Bit different from our usual chats. We went to some areas we don't tend to go to, but I loved it all the same. I loved this chat. When I first found this, I have to speak to this guy. This is just me here. The things my dad told me about when he grew up and all this said, yep, that's it. So my dad had a view in history. He lived through a part of history where there was a big rise in fascism in this country, and it was squashed. So, and it was quite quickly. It wasn't a punch to the face. In this case, it was someone got a brick to the face. That's how it got stopped.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't. We haven't known each other. We don't know each other, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you found me. I'm glad you wanted to chat about it, and I was able to surprise you with some of my Extreme Studios stories. That's fun. So I'm a lifer in comics. My Pilot Studios and then my Red 5 Comics Association, and we'll see what happens next. Maybe a cartoon.
And I can't believe I always forget this question, but would you consider a visit to the Outer Hebrides if you got the chance, if the opportunity arose?
Where you are?
Yeah, where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, we did France. And we did France and the Netherlands, Amsterdam area, just the last summer. So, and I love Europe, and my wife would love to go to the UK, and I, of course, would too. But so we'll probably end up there in the next couple of years, definitely.
All right. Well, watch this space. Something might happen there. So
okay.
Again, thanks everyone for tuning in. Big thanks to Ben for taking the time to speak to us. And again, just like and leave us a review, help us get up in the algorithm, and thank you everyone for turning out, and we'll speak very soon. Cheers everyone.
Thanks, pal. Thank you.
Right.